We're live, Chair.
Thank you very much, Erwin. Bore da, welcome everyone to the 5th of May meeting of the Powys County Council Governance and Audit Committee. We'll move to agenda item 1, which is apologies, and we have apologies from Gareth Hall. The other thing I need to draw attention to members and anyone else who's with us is that we will not be having agenda item 13, which is the risk deep dive into the demand in children's services. Our intention is to reschedule that deep dive to a later date. And picking up last month's meeting, I'm also conscious that Councillor Gareth suggested that the committee meet prior to risk deep dive discussions to really focus in on what we want to get out of those discussions. So in the intervening period, Wynne and I will take that away and endeavour to work out a schedule of pre-meetings when we're having the risk deep dives, but we won't be having a risk deep dive today. For officers present, thank you very much for the work that has gone into prepare the papers. I would encourage you to assume that members have read the papers and there's no expectation that you need to go through every bit of detail of the paper. However, it would help us if you were able to draw attention to the salient points of the paper that you want us to consider and what you want from the committee and where you would like us to focus. That would be very helpful. I can see Councillor William has his hand up. Would you like to come in, Councillor William?
Yes, very briefly, Chair. First of all, apologies for my own technical issue this morning. I went to the diary marker and then had to dive into the to get the link. That was entirely my own issue. I wanted to check if apologies had been received from Councillor Gareth Ratcliffe because he's not currently well. He's been signed off work for some days and is recovering from an accident. So I just wanted to. I don't believe he's on the call. If he is, it's against doctor's orders.
He doesn't seem to be here. When did we have any comms from Councillor Gareth?
I haven't heard from him, but I'll note him now as an apology.
Right, I think we need to note him as an apology, and also if he's had an accident, Councillor William, if you're in touch with him, please could you convey the committee's best wishes to him for a speedy recovery?
Of course I will, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll move on to agenda item 2, any disclosure of interest. Any disclosures of interest in connection with the agenda of today's meeting? No. We'll move to the minutes and the action log from the meeting on the 31st of March. I'm just logging back into my other device. We'll turn the pages and I will take any points of clarification, correction on matters arising as we turn the pages. So page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and that takes us to page 15 of the big pack. If there are no comments or points of clarification, is the committee content for the minutes to be approved and for me to sign them? If someone could
move.
Yeah, second. I'll second, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. We will now move on to the Audit Wales items, and Beth Ann is going to take us through items 4, 5 and 7, and then David will address briefly agenda item 6. So Bethan, if you could lead us through 4, 5 and 7, and also obviously Jane will give you the opportunity to make any comments also on these items. Bethan.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning everybody. Thank you for having me. So I am going to run through, as Chair said, item 4, 5 and 7. So item 4 is our annual audit summary. So this is something you'll be familiar with. We undertake it every year, and it outlines sort of what we've been up to since the last annual audit summary as an organisation. You'll see within it some key facts around the council and our audit duties and the duties which we deliver our work under. And within it, you'll see some high-level summaries and outputs from not just the local work and the financial work, but some of the national reviews that have taken place towards the back. Again, as always, if there are any other publications that you'd like to see work that we've undertaken, please head over to our website, because all of them can be available on there, which will be obviously updated live. So the annual audit summary is a sort of moment in time. If I can jump on to item 5, which is our assurance and risk report. You may not see one of these next year, because we appreciate that there's probably a little bit of duplication in the annual audit summary compared to the assurance and risk report, but we've brought it today for completion. So this has 3 main areas which we looked at under our assurance and risk work. One was around the financial position, which we appreciate will be out of date now. You will have much more updated financial information relating to this. The arrangements put in place around the Local Government Elections Wales Act, which were all there. We didn't identify any problems with the arrangements that were put in place around it. But one of the areas I'd like to draw your attention to, if I can, is the carbon reduction plan. Now, all of these pieces of work were done in every local authority, but you will find a recommendation in relation to the carbon work. So we've given some narrative around what we found when we undertook this. But you will see that there is a recommendation 1 there. In order to meet its zero ambition, the council needs to fully cost its intended action plan and assure that this is aligned with its medium-term financial strategy. Now, what I would ask is that this is tracked in exactly the same way that you track any other recommendation, and we'll sort of come back and speak to you about how you feel you've progressed with that. And it might be that there's been quite a bit of progress already since this work was undertaken, but it is still a recommendation which we'd ask you to review as part of your usual tracking processes. If I can jump down to item 7, which is the Q3 programme update. Unfortunately, this was missed off the last agenda, so I'm going to draw your attention to some of the reports which are outstanding or are due to come to you quite soon. The unscheduled care review report, which you'll find in, I just look for which section it is, bear with me, under the performance audit work, is currently being drafted. So that part of the unscheduled care report, which is around that sort of patient flow out of the back door, is currently being drafted. You will see there's an item on there around springing forward assets, which is also being drafted and should be with you by next week. And the planning report has actually been issued to the council in final. Now, what I'm not sure is when that is due to come, because I can't see it on the next agenda. So I'm wondering whether it's due to come to either the next Governance and Audit Committee or the one after. So if there's any questions on any of those items, Chair, I'm happy to take them.
Thanks very much. Councillor Pete. Councillor Pete, are you on mute?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry, just struggling with the sausage fingers. Apologies. I had 2 questions, one on paper 4 and one on paper 5. So okay. Is it okay to do them both, Bethan? Or
yes, yeah, of course.
Yeah. On paper 4, I think on page 18, I saw a phrase about usable financial reserves at 21% of our annual spending on services. So I suppose I just wanted to, on that one, try and understand the implications of that percentage. So, for example, does it perhaps mean that we're charging a higher level of council tax instead of using reserves. And then on paper 5, I think it's page 42.34, talks about using power of general competence.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wondered what those powers would give us and why we don't plan to use it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Regarding the percentage, I think I'm going to have to pass that one over to either Jane or David to pick up. And if it's something that I need to take away and come back, because I didn't write the financial aspect of this report, I can come back with the details for you, unless Jane and Dave can answer it now for you.
Jane, are you able to come in on that point?
I can come in on from a council perspective. I mean,
Yeah.
the usable financial reserves cover a number of different funds. So we have the general fund, which is the one that's considered to be the real true sort of free reserve for the council, and that is just over 4.4%, I think it was in the last report, of our net revenue budget. So that's quite low in terms of that general fund reserve, but it is within the limits that we've set as a council. The remainder of the reserves are there for a number of reasons. They can include, or they do include, school reserves, HRA reserves, they include capital receipts, they include grants unapplied. So there are lots of funds within that total that are committed for specific things. And then we also have a number of specific reserves, again, which are committed to meet spend, probably during last year and into this new year now. So obviously the cost of living and energy prices and so on, we recognise that risk in our budget, and some of those reserves were there to meet some of those additional pressures for 1 year only. So in terms of the 21%, that sounds large, I suppose, in terms of the overall position. We can look to see how that fares. I don't know if David has got any information about how that fares against other authorities. But it's not all free money, if you get my meaning, but it is money that we have freely available to use in our budgets for the next year.
Thanks, Jane. John, do you want to come in on this point?
Yes, if I may. There's some very useful information on which you can find on page 37.7. It refers to local government financial sustainability data tool. If you access that, there's an awful lot of very useful information there in comparative information between local authorities, Welsh local authorities. Unfortunately, though, of course, it's out of date. When is it? Can anybody tell me when this might be updated? Because it's a very useful thing for us to look at.
Yeah, we're actually undertaking another review of financial sustainability this year. It is something that we tend to do year on year, financial sustainability. So I'm assuming that we'll just update it as part of the work for that, but I'll come back to you if you want and see if I can give you a specific date on when that data tool is to be updated.
If you would, because it is very, very useful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry, Chair.
No, thanks. Bethan, could you just pause, because I want to check Councillor Chris might want to come in on the same point.
Yeah, well, it's in that same section on page 37. What I picked up on is, again, I looked at that sustainability data tool. I thought it was interesting too. But on point 9, you've got on there about funding gaps, and even though there was reductions down, which would appear to be positive, I got the feeling when I was reading it that this was risky or negative, and I just wanted to get clarification on that. It left me with more questions than what it gave me answers to.
Are you talking about the forecasted funding gap at point 9, Councillor?
Yes.
Yeah, decreased from.
Yeah, sorry, you say that it decreased, which you then think, well, that's positive. But then I just got a feeling that that was said in a negative way. And again, when I come then to point 10, you know, you've then flagged up that there will be nearly a £15 million gap going in the next 4 years. So I come away asking more questions on it, and I know our reserve factors then are covered in points 11 and that on there, but we're one of the lower councils in relation to reserve holdings compared to other councils within Wales.
Yeah.
And then I ask myself the question is, what is the right level of reserves that we should be holding? And obviously we've took out over many years significant amount of monies out of the system, and yet we're still being asked to do the same thing again. And I just get this feeling of austerity still in the background. They're pulling away on it, because you're then saying that if we can't reduce spending, then you have to look at reducing services, and I just come away with the negativity to it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I don't know if that was the intention.
Well, no, I don't necessarily think it was the intention. I think that one thing, I know I flagged it at the start, but we need to remember that this was a moment in time piece of work.
Yeah.
So actually things might look quite different now, and at the time this might have absolutely have been the case. I can see Jane's got a hand up. I'm assuming Jane's going to come in and sort of update the financial position, and I don't know whether Dave, you want to come in and talk to that as well, around levels of reserves, especially. Yeah.
Jane, I will bring you in, but I noticed Councillor Williams' hand is up as well, and I wondered if it would be useful if he made any comment related to this now before Jane fully comes in. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. It does kind of play into to my question, really, because thanks to Bethan for speaking to this report. As she said, this is a snapshot in time report. My question, really, particularly given that so much of the work that's reflected here was very recent and quite pacey. Things had a whole set of actions had just happened or were in train at the time of writing. I just wanted to check whether or not the Audit Wales receives updates of some of these important work streams as they're developing, or whether you wait for a summary of our own ongoing progress against this, because clearly the issue around costings is absolutely essential. It's there in your recommendation, but lots of the other progress around some of the strands of what's just been set up and so on. One other thing I wanted to just flag was the fact that that within the Powys territory, we've got the other special purpose authority of the Banau Brycheiniog, or the National Park, just to not to court controversy on that point. But we've obviously got the opportunity to make even greater progress when we've got two authorities working in some of these areas. Whether or not that issue around collaboration and co-production falls in the remit of Audit Wales, or whether that's a sort of separate concern.
Sorry, can I just clarify that
Sure.
slightly, Councillor Powell? When you say the issue of collaboration and co-production, and co-production in what respect?
With regard to the climate emergency and measures to mitigate against that, or to do the best we can in the circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that'll come down to your specific strategy. I mean, and you do have significant climate strategies in the council. You've got I think it's your red kite strategy that you've got, and there's lots of activity and work going on around climate. And I think it's then up for the council to decide how they take that forward and assure themselves that the activity that they've got is costed and linked to what they're trying to achieve. So it's about being realistic about where, your ambitions and where you want to go with them. Putting the actions in place to get you there, and making sure that they are costed, linking in with your medium-term financial strategy. I would say you're probably not the only local authority in this position. If you looked at our other reports around this, you'd probably see a very similar recommendation across Wales, in that lots of the local authorities are incredibly ambitious about where they want to go, but actually costing out and what that looks like is probably quite difficult. Working with partners, I suspect, is intrinsic to what you're trying to do through your collaboration with your corporate objectives and your corporate plans and how you use your assets, and that's very sort of clearly articulated within your updated strategic asset plan around environmental as well. So it's all there. It's, you know, it's all, there's lots of activity. It's all there. It's just around how, and we appreciate how difficult it is, but it's around about being realistic about how much that costs.
Thanks very much, Beth. I'm going to bring Jane in to talk to the broader issue about funding gap, use of reserves and financial projections. Jane, I'm making an assumption, perhaps you could clarify if I'm correct, that the financial implications of this and forecasting are also bound up in the work around reimagining Powys. I don't know if we've actually changed the name, so apologies if I'm using the old name, but I'm assuming that it's bound up in the work ongoing on reimagining.
Yeah, if I touch on that first, absolutely it is. You know, very much a focus across the authority now in terms of the net zero commitment and so on. And every piece of work that we do has to consider that and how we get to where we need to be by 2030. And of course, that will then result in that costed plan going forward. So a lot of work happening on that. In terms of the funding gaps, the critical point to remember here is each of these years and each of the MTFSs is done at a point in time. So, you know, what we were forecasting in March 21 changed significantly, as did the funding that we received from Welsh Government. So the assumptions around funding, you know, we work on what we know, and we do some scenario modelling here in Powys to sort of look at different scenarios. So that funding position did change significantly, as you'll all be aware, in terms of the budget allocations that we had for the current year as well. So if we looked at those funding gaps now, they would again be different to what you see in the paper that you've got before you. And in fact, our medium-term financial plan looks at those scenario modelings, and over the next 5 years, we have a cumulative funding gap of either 24 million or 50 million, again, depending on those scenarios. So the MTFS that was actually approved by Council back in March is the updated position, so members will all have that available. In terms of the level of reserves, as part of budget setting each year, we have to consider the level of risk in our budget plan. And we also have to consider how we manage that risk and whether the level of reserves that we hold are appropriate in terms of that budget plan. And that is an annual review, and Council again gets advice from me as the 151 officer as to whether we feel that the level of reserves we hold is appropriate. And it will be different for every council across Wales, depending on their individual budget plans. So there's not a direct comparison. However, as John pointed out, some of the stats that are available does give you a flavour of where Powys is compared to other authorities, but it doesn't tell you what the differences is across each of those authorities, and that's an important factor.
Thank you very much, Jane. Beth, and just before I bring you back in, because I can see your hand is up, I think Councillor Pete had 2 questions, and I don't think we've addressed his second question. So can we just not forget that, please?
Yeah, that's what I was coming back in on, Chair.
Perfect,
Absolutely,
perfect.
Yeah, no problem. So your query about whether we sort of are up to date, absolutely. You know, colleagues in finance and with Jane meet regularly. So obviously we get the reports which get published, but colleagues meet regularly to discuss different aspects of finances and bits and pieces. So yeah, we're absolutely in touch. But on your second question around the general power of competence. So when the local government elections in Wales Act 2021 was enacted, it conferred something called the general power of competence onto local authorities, which gives local authorities the power to undertake some commercial activities. So, you know, there are sort of rules and restrictions around it, but it's that sort of general power to undertake some commercial activity. That's what that power is. And some local authorities have decided to use it and undertake more commercial activities, and some have decided not to. It's around risk and risk appetite, and you know, different local authorities have different ambitions for different reasons.
Thank you very much, Beth. And Councillor Pete, does that answer your question?
Hi. Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Bethan. I suppose the only bit, but I don't know if it's one that can be answered now, I suppose, is I understand what you say about the powers of competence, but I just wondered if there were the reasons why we don't plan to use it, or whether we've not had that debate yet at council.
Yeah, I mean, that's something for you to discuss, I suppose, about, you know, whether you want to have intentions to, or why not. Really, it's not a judgment from us, it's just an observation.
Thanks, Beth. And I can see that Councillor David, our cabinet member, wants to come in now.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly with regard to the reserve situation, Jane's actually explained fully, you know, the difference between usable reserves with regard to ring fence, service specific reserves, risk reserve, etc. But the general fund reserve, which is the reserve that's held for the unforeseen events, is only about just over £9 million, which is about 4%, just over 4% of the actual net revenue expenditure. So that's very low. I think last time I looked, I think it's about the 7th lowest in Wales as far as the other authorities are concerned. So I don't think it would be prudent, and I don't think it would be good budgetary management to start thinking of using a reserve that's there for the unexpected, which is already very, very low, to actually counteract any increase in council tax. I think if you look at last year's budget setting process, we were actually facing inflation of 10 or 11%, and that was the increase in the cost of services generally. We managed to set a council tax of 3.8% against services, which was quite significant actually, and I think that was quite an achievement in itself. We had to set another 1.2% to cover the increase in the fire levy. So we did that without actually having to look at the general fund reserve. So just making that point, that the general fund reserve as it stands is already very, very low. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much for that commentary, Councillor David, much appreciated. Bethan, anything else you want to draw attention to in your 3 reports?
No, not on that, Chair. That's it from me.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from committee members on items 4, 5 and 7? Councillor David, no, okay, right, so I think not. In which case we'll move to agenda item 6 and bring in David to just briefly introduce this item. Probably we don't need to spend a huge amount of time in this, David.
No, absolutely. Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this report has been brought just for information only. I think it's actually been brought by Jane rather than ourselves. So it's an addendum to the Audit of Accounts report, which we presented in January to this committee, which contained all the things that we have to report by auditing standards to you before the accounts are approved. So this report here is just list the other recommendations coming out of our audit findings. To say we do it every year. I think there was one last year. I think it had about 6 or 7 recommendations on it. But this has now been brought to yourselves for information. It'll be used by both ourselves and the finance team to sort of look at how we can improve the process for this current year's accounts and their audit. Just flag up that all the recommendations that we made have been accepted, and with the actions that they're going to be taken in 22-23 and beyond, and then we will follow those up as part of our audit work this year.
Thank you very much, David. Jane, have you got anything to add to David's comments, please?
Only just to say you have the response from us in the report, and these actions have been built into our ongoing audit plans for closing of the accounts this year. So we'll be mindful of the recommendations and make sure that we put the appropriate actions in place to deal with those. So really, Chair, I wasn't going to add anything further than that. You will see some of this appearing in the reports that you get around our closure of accounts work.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you very much, Jane. Okay. I will open for questions, but Jane, on the basis of what you've said, I'm taking it that the committee will be able to be assured that all of these management actions are being taken through our normal scrutiny of the accounts process going forward.
Absolutely, and they will be picked up as part of the seminars that we do, where we go through in detail around some of these recommendations. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that assurance, and I'll bring in Councillor Peat.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I don't know if this may be indulging me, so I don't mind if you want to gloss over those, but I just had two quick questions, which may be more for my understanding. I think page 64. I was just trying to understand what the implication of overstating the gross book value of assets is. And then I think on page 69, it talks about reviewing the bad debt percentages. And I just wondered what that process involved. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Oh, and you come.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, on the gross book value. So within the accounts, obviously there's a detailed note on the fixed assets, which records the gross book value and the depreciated amount to arrive at a figure in the balance sheet. So what we were saying is that the net book value, net book value, which is the gross book value less depreciation, we don't have a problem with that figure, but what the gross book value figure and the accumulated depreciation might be both overstated. For our audit opinion, we are required to sort of audit every figure, if you like. You know, we're happy with the net book value, but not the gross book value. I mean, this is an issue. It's not just a powers issue. I think it's across all local government bodies. Probably, certainly most of them, that the records weren't quite historic, and the information is just not held. So they're cast out on the gross book value figures. Hence why SIPFA introduced this dispensation to to not disclose it. So, but it's only a temporary issue. It will need to be sorted out in a couple of years' time. So we just wanted to flag up the importance, of not just sort of sitting on it and doing nothing. It's to sort of plan ahead for when SIPFA do come in and presumably issue new guidance on how they want it disclosed.
David, sorry if I could just jump in if I may. Does that mean then if the depreciation is overstated, we've actually got more money than we think we've got? Or I'm trying to think of it in terms of a profit and loss account, or is that wrong?
No, it wouldn't affect your level of reserves, because the depreciation is all reversed back out. But when you're calculating the reserve balances, there'd be an adjustment for this depreciation anyway, so it wouldn't affect your level of reserves.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peat. Any further questions on the addendum report? Thank you. And I think, Jane, you've put your hand up. Do you want to come in again?
Yeah, Councillor Peat mentioned the debt calculation, the percentage.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So again, we would review that. I would like to see it reviewed annually. Circumstances change, the debt position will change, so it's important that we do review that. And I think the recommendation from the auditors here is that we do that more regularly. So that is just we will look at the overall position, look at levels of outstanding debt, and then we do a calculation for bad debt as part of that. So that's something that we will review as we close the accounts now.
Thanks, Jane.
Thanks very much, Jane. Thanks for your questions, Councillor Peat. If there are no further questions on the Audit Wales items, I'll move us to item 8, which is our internal audit swap items. By way of introduction to this item, the committee will recall that we discussed the annual audit plan at our last meeting, and we agreed that in the absence of having been provided with an annual audit plan to approve, we agreed Q1 internal audit activity. So I think that's important to note. As colleagues will have seen from today's paper, it is largely a Q4 update report, and it doesn't provide us with an annual audit plan to formally approve, and Ian will explain some of the issues behind that. But I think it is important for the committee to remember that one of its objectives and stated purposes is to approve the annual audit plan, ensuring there is sufficient and appropriate coverage with a strong emphasis on risk management, and resources are available to implement the plan. So at the moment, as chair, I don't feel that the committee has been provided with a draft plan to enable it to discharge that particular piece of responsibility. So the current proposal is that our meeting on the 23rd of June, we will be provided formally with a 23-24 draft plan. And my expectation is that we'll in future receive that draft plan in Q4 of the prior year, so that we start each financial year with a fully agreed plan. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I don't think the sequencing is quite right yet, but we will hopefully, working closely with SWAP colleagues and Jane, will get it right for future years. So with that said, I'll bring in Ian to talk to the Q4 plan and to add anything that he would like to brief the committee on issues around presenting us with a full draft annual plan. So Ian, I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair has mentioned, this is a Q4 activity report. So I'll run through that, and during the presentation, I'll talk about the planning process that we're going through, some of the issues that we're facing, and what we intend to provide to resolve those. So the purpose of the Q4 activity plan is to keep members updated on our activity, on the work that we're doing and the outcomes from that, and I guess any significant concerns I need to bring to your attention. The report is item 8, and that's on the supplementary agenda pack, and it starts on page 3. I need to make an apology, first of all. On page 1, there is a small error in one of the tables there that hasn't added up correctly the number of audits in progress. I think it's there as 64, it should be 67. So just to correct that small error. In terms of the headlines, it's really important that internal audit work aligns to the council's risk, the strategic risk wherever possible. We can't clearly audit all of those areas because some areas are unauditable to a certain degree, but wherever possible, it's important to have that connection. We approved a Q1 plan plus a small pipeline as an interim measure in the last meeting. The new plan of work that we are going to propose in June will also not only have the links to strategic risk and other factors, but it will also have a strong linkage to the corporate objectives. And I think it's important to have that linkage there because those are the key areas that the council are focusing on. And so it's very important that internal audit work is focused on those areas also, because to make sure that those are delivered effectively and that you as a committee get assurance around those areas. And also it helps internal audit work add value because we're very relevant. So at the moment, the council is still looking to formalise some of the detail around that plan. And I'm expecting that shortly. That will come shortly. And when we have that, that will be the final driver that determines internal audit work over a longer period. Not, it will be 12 months plus. It will give you the view going forward. And as soon as we have that, I will work on that and finalise it, and it will be presented to the committee in June. I will also share it with the chair beforehand to make sure that she's had input into that. And also we will send out a number of questionnaires to members of the audit committee also to get their views on areas about areas that should be included in the annual planning process as well. So I think the key headline there is it's important that our work is prioritised and focused on what the current council activity is to make sure that it's relevant, and it gives you an up-to-date opinion. On page 7 of the report, it looks at the activity. And we have completed 54 audits in the year. We've got 7 that are in draft for the client at the moment, and we've got 7 in progress. Those 7 in progress are as a result of some staff illness within the team. We've had some long-term sickness, which will be resolved shortly. And as soon as that member of staff returns, we will then obviously move on those areas and those reports and report those to committee. In terms of the opinion, the overall opinion, it's a positive message. 80% of all the opinions issued in the year are positive. That means they're either reasonable or substantial assurance. However, there are 2 areas of concern that I will bring to the committee's attention, and those are around housing voids and statutory compliance. These will be reported in full to the next committee. So the full internal audit report will come to the next committee, and officers will be asked to attend to give assurance to members around some of the actions that have been developed and some of the issues that we've identified. In terms of your role, in the role of the committee to make sure that actions are mitigated and risks are not outstanding, we have an action tracking dashboard there. This has also been impacted by some staff sickness, some of the administration we've been unable to do over the last 3 months. And so whilst we've got the dashboard there that shows the outline figures, I felt it wasn't right to give you some of the detail around some of the outstanding actions because the authority hadn't been given the chance to input into those. And so therefore some of it may have been incorrect, and I felt it would be unfair to raise these to your attention. SWAP are transitioning to a new audit system called Audit Board. We started that process already, and we're using that for operational work these days. The main advantage of that is that going forward, the members of the committee, members of the council will be able to see real-time dashboards that will show you our work, our activity, the detail, where we are with action tracking, and where we are with quality, and a number of other areas that will help committee be able to form a judgment, first of all, at where the council are in terms of risk and assurance and internal control, but also around the performance of the internal audit team. So you'll be able to see that in a real-time basis. That's due to be implemented for you as members and officers on the 1st of July. So we're going to provide training to help you, navigate around the dashboard. They are Power BI reports, so you'll be somewhat familiar, but we'll certainly come and give you some training before they go live. And then finally, just to go back to the overall opinion, really, in June, I will be presenting a report on my responsibility is to present a report on the annual audit opinion. But today's tracker shows that as an indicative opinion, I can give a reasonable assurance opinion at this stage. So if members have any questions, I'd gladly try and answer them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you for the coverage of your commentary. It's very much appreciated in terms of SWAP's plans for the future and how things will be going forward. Any questions from committee members, please? John, floor's yours.
So I'm just unmuting. I was a wee bit concerned to hear about your concerns surrounding housing voids. This is one of the reasons why we brought the business that was previously being dealt with by HALPS back into council. And I have not heard anywhere that move has not been successful. Do your concerns on your report surround that transfer back?
The concerns on the report, I mean, to give you a brief history, we looked at housing voids probably 3 years ago and gave them a limited opinion, and we felt that there were some more opportunities to make sure that we moved houses into the public arena again to obviously to help the housing situation to generate income. The piece of work we've done now is a follow-up of that, and that follow-up's been done over the transition somewhat from HALPS to the council. I think without giving too much away, the focus of the report doesn't look at the transition itself, and it doesn't look to that transition, but it looks at the pure evidential figures around how many voids we have, and the performance in that void arena. And I think we're somewhat still unsighted as an authority around the performance in those areas.
It's interesting you say that, Ian, because the ERC Scrutiny Committee has a working group on looking at the success or otherwise of the transition from HALPS. And this has not been raised, but I think it really, I will certainly raise it at the next meeting. As an issue, because apparently there were no problems.
I wouldn't say that the issues we found in the audit were a direct result of the transition from HALPS to the local authority.
Right, but the numbers are still not satisfactory.
I guess my comment about, I think there's a lack of visibility at the moment on those numbers.
Okay, well, we'll wait the report with some interest then. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. And I can see Councillor Ange wants to come in.
Hi, yeah, no, it was just I'm on tenant scrutiny, and there seems to be the main problem is with staffing. They can't get enough plumbers, they can't get enough electricians, and they can't get enough qualified tradesmen to be able to do everything that needs to be done. They're working through it as and when they can, but that seems to be, having brought up at that scrutiny, that is what the main problem is, if that helps anyway. But there is a problem, but it is that.
Thanks very much. And Jane, to come in.
Just to say, I know EMT receive reports. I can't recall exactly the numbers in the last one that we had, but EMT does receive reports around compliance, which would include voids as well. So there is probably an update report that would give you a most up-to-date position on that as well. So I don't know if Ian's seen that one, but that might be something to share with committee to give you a bit more information, I suppose, in terms of the current position.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks. Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Ian for speaking to his report. On this matter of housing, and take my hat off to Councillor Ange, who's more engaged in the detail of our tenant experience than I am, but this is one of the biggest areas of my casework load as well. I just wanted to ask whether Ian had been cited on the recent survey that's been carried out with housing staff. It's a relevant document has just been circulated on email by the cabinet member just this morning with some information that I'd not previously seen. I just wondered whether this would be it's the tenant engagement survey, which involves some county councillor feedback that we had the opportunity to input on, and also crucially a significant number of housing colleagues, because it seems to me that they've got obviously the most direct sort of coalface experience, and whether or not we'd be monitoring that and future survey work both with staff and also crucially with the tenants as well.
Thank you, Councillor William. I'm not aware of the document and the communication that's come out this morning. I'll certainly have a look at that. In terms of the process of tenant engagement and performance and quality, there are bits of work that will be in the next year's plan around the repairs and maintenance process. So we will be looking specifically at that engagement and how we measure quality and how we measure poor performance. So we will cover aspects of that as well in the next year's plan, or in this year's plan.
Thanks very much. Does that answer your question for now, Councillor William?
Yeah.
We can have a more detailed discussion when we have the plan, and we'll obviously have a detailed discussion on the two internal audit reports at our next meeting.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I think given the extent of interest that is already apparent from the committee on these two reports, I think it will be absolutely essential that we have senior officers in attendance to support that scrutiny and assurance process. I'm sure they will be, but just to underscore the importance of that, if officers could take that away. Anything else on Ian's plans or his report presented today? No. Pausing? No. We'll move on, colleagues, to other agenda items, and item 9, we'll receive and consider the report of Councillor David, the Cabinet Member for Finance and Corporate Transformation, on strategic risk. I'm assuming Councillor David will introduce the paper. Is Bet with us, Jane, or if Bet is with us?
Beth is in the room, Chair.
Good, thanks very much. Nice to see you, or nice, I can't actually see you, Bet, but it's nice of you to join us. Thank you. Councillor David, do you want to introduce the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I said Bets will take us through
Yes.
any changes and any significant points in it. Just to say that as at the end of Q4 22-23, there are 16 risks on the strategic risk register, and all the strategic risk owners have been asked to provide a short summary of progress since the last quarter. And if you look at the report, you'll see the details contained for each risk in Appendix A, and you'll see Appendix B, where we've got the heat map, which you're more than familiar with now.
Yes, we are.
Thanks.
We are. Yeah. Thank you very much, Councillor David. And we are asked to review the strategic risk and to examine the assurance of the effectiveness of the arrangements in place to manage and discharge our response to these risks. So, Bets, I'll open it to you to take us through the key changes, and then we'll open the floor for a discussion and some questions. So over to you, Bets.
Okay, no worries. Good morning, everyone. So as Councillor David has just said, so during Q4, there are 16 risks on the strategic risk register, and the full details are in Appendix A and Appendix B, which we can look at later. Detailed under 3.5 in the main report, EMT are requesting that during this quarter we would like to de-escalate the risk, which has a reference PCC 005. That risk is if there is a pandemic breakout or any other influenza-like illness, which results in increased staff absenteeism, increased demand for services from residents, increased workload for council staff, and closure of council premises, then this will be an increased workload for the remaining council staff and increased service demand. It's currently rated at a score of 9, and the justification for asking for the de-escalation is we now consider it appropriate to de-escalate this risk. It'll be continued to be managed by Nigel, our Executive Director, and the risk will be routinely monitored via the newly formed Health Protection Team, which will be obviously taking ongoing advice from the Public Health Wales and other such bodies. So the oversight will be maintained by the Health Protection Strategic Oversight Group, and the risk will then be re-evaluated in the autumn as part of the winter planning for 23-24. Also, just to highlight to you, under section 3.6, as per our risk management framework, any risk that is scored 15 above must be considered by SLT for escalation. The first 4 risks, the first 3 risks, we're not suggesting, proposing that they be escalated because they're being successfully managed on service risk registers. The last 3 risks are risks that relate to the transformation programme, and this, as per the risk management framework, has been highlighted to the programme delivery manager and the programme manager, and they will be considered by the programme board as to whether they feel that they should be escalated. Also, just drawing attention to a piece of work that myself and Andrew Twigger have done during the last quarter. We looked at the National Security Risk Assessment, which was published at the end of December, and we did a cross-referencing exercise from that assessment to our risk register. Having reviewed that National Security Risk Assessment, some risks have been highlighted to the relevant services, and discussions are taking place as to whether they think anything needs to go on their risk register and be managed, obviously, by the council, or if indeed it is sufficiently being covered in their business continuity plan and therefore doesn't warrant being on the risk register. Finally, just like to mention, and it's great that we've got Ian with us here today, Internal Audit conducted their audit into risk management. It's hot off the press because it was completed at the end of March 2023. It found the council to be reasonable into risk management. And in summary, the council has made progress in its risk maturity journey, moving from an assessment rating of 2 to 3, which is fantastic. Obviously, we've got a lot more work to do, and you'll see in the report all the areas that relates to. So it's showing a clear improvement at the higher organisational level of the councils. However, we have noted that we do need to do some improvement work at the lower levels to strengthen risk management across the council. And the full report you'll find in Appendix C, but I'm sure you've already seen it as part of audit reports coming to governance and audit. The 2019 risk management framework has been reviewed and updated. That is going to SLT next Wednesday, and it's coming to you at the first opportunity afterwards for June the 23rd. So I'm sure we'll have a good session on the 23rd where we can discuss the updates to the management framework. And there's just been a couple of improvements made to JCAD, which I wouldn't normally mention in today's committee, but one of them I think you'll particularly be interested in because it was partly as a result of your request. That a decision be made to activate the functionality in JCAD to improve the management of controls, i.e. mitigation. So we've now got that functionality in JCAD, so all risk owners can now provide a deadline for when, if it's applicable for their mitigation, and also on a regular basis provide a kind of percentage as to how they feel that mitigation is coming on. It is going to be a little bit of a rule of thumb. It does depend on the officer, but it's given us a little bit more assurance that how we are managing the risks. So finally, I'd like to end with the recommendation, which is to recommend that Cabinet notes the strategic risk register and is satisfied with the progress against the mitigating actions for Q4 and approves the de-escalation of PC 005 from the risk register. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Beth. Very good paper, and thanks for including the swap report. That was actually really helpful. I found it really interesting. Chair's prerogative. I found the assessment on which page of the big pack, 110, the risk maturity model, the assessment against that, quite interesting. And what you've said about awareness and training, I would hope going forward that we would see that our assessment against that risk maturity model continuing to improve. Because there are some gaps, but I can see that others would like to come in. I'm going to go to Councillor Graham first and then Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to take us back to the area that you referred to at the start of the meeting, not being on the agenda around risk, and that being in children's services. Because I note the remarks in this document, and I am concerned about this matter and concerned about why it hasn't come before us today as planned. I think this committee deserves to know why it's not before us, because it is a matter that I have real concerns about, and I'm sure members of this panel do as well. What really concerns me is that I think a figure of almost £3 million was taken out of budgets for the year ahead in children's services, and yet we are seeing significant problems within that department, and I think we need to know, what effect that's going to have on budgets. We note that Cabinet have been asked, and are going to be asked to approve further appointments within that department, either on short or long-term basis. And I think that it's one that we really need to be concerned about as a scrutiny committee. And I'm not sure whether there's anybody present that can give us any answers today.
Thank you, Councillor Graham, and I absolutely share your concern. My understanding from officers about the agenda item not being, and the deep dive not taking place today, is that the team were unprepared to support our deep dive considerations today. They felt that they hadn't had enough time to get prepared. Unless there's anything you want to add to that.
Not at all, Chair. I think that's a good summary.
Yeah, so it is really disappointing, Councillor Graham, especially when we are actually looking at the risk, and we understand the extent of pressure in that service. And we will prioritise that for a deep dive on the 23rd of June. And it would be helpful if officers could take that back to the team. And when picking up Councillor Gareth's comment last time, the strength of Councillor Graham's feeling, I think the committee ought to have at least a half-hour, 45-minute pre-meeting to really understand what we want to get out of the deep dive on the 23rd of June, because it is a matter of real importance to the council and to our community. Before I bring in Councillor Peat, I would just pause to see if any officers want to add to the comments made about or answer anything that Councillor Graham has raised. Jane.
I would just pick up, I'm just going back and looking at the budget allocation for the service, and actually the service did receive additional funding as part of this year's budget setting. I think the service actually had a 6.2% increase in its overall funding levels. That being said, there are a number of savings being proposed by the service, and they will be looking to deliver on those. I'm not getting any indication at the moment that there's any of those at risk. So I just wanted to point that out, because I think we thought they'd had a reduction, and just to be clear on that.
Thanks, Jane, for that clarification. Right. Councillor Graham, is your hand still up, or is that your hand from before?
Apologies.
Okay, got you. Councillor Peat, and then after Councillor Peat, Councillor Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I would support the comments that Councillor Graham raised there. I wasn't going to talk about that. I just didn't know if mine were two separate points. I didn't know if Councillor Chris wanted to add anything to Councillor Graham's before I go off on the other points.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it is in relation to the children's services one, so I'm grateful for that. Thank you, Councillor Peat. It's really about due process then. in relation to when we do a deep dive into one of these particular areas, and there will be a number over a period of time that we would do, what is the process that we do give to the service areas? Do we give them a set period of notice, and do we then give them a period of a set of questions that we're looking for? Is there then a request from various officers to provide us then with data so that we can compare it? Because I've been in other panels where people are then saying we've not got that information in front of us to be able to make an informed decision and question appropriately. But in some ways, I always then say, when I've been on the other side of it, where I've been inspected as you know, from a health perspective, you'll get 24 hours notice, or you're on the you know, and they're coming in a couple of days time. You've got to really have your ducks in a row, and it is a little bit disappointing that we're not picking this up on there. Whilst I respect there can be challenges on it, there needs to be a due process, and we need to have that clear in our own minds as committee members of how that's working, so that we're not then disappointed, because that just raises more questions of why it isn't happening.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chris. It does increase anxiety levels. I'm going to bring Wyn in. I can see his hands up. And well, Wyn.
Just wanted to say, Chair, yes, we give as much notice as we possibly can to services. The current way we're operating, and this is something I think we probably need to discuss with the committee itself in preparation for the next deep dive, and probably we need to call it sooner rather than later, simply because to give people advance notice. What we've said is I will submit an extract of the risk register, which I received from vets. That goes out to the committee itself. The committee, you know, the service will know its own risk, but then it's up to them how they address it. And last time what we've done, and this was the model we were following this time, was to have a presentation from the service as to what exactly is the background, what are they doing about the issue, mitigations, etc. You may want to follow a slightly different approach, but I think in light of experience, it's probably worth you sitting back, reflecting on the first two that you've done, and perhaps thinking about how you want to approach it for the future, so we can have perhaps a better structured model than we've got at the moment. It's finding our way really in terms of how we're doing these, and probably each one would be different. But that's a conversation we can have, Chair.
Yeah, thanks very much, Wyn, and thanks, Councillor Chris, for raising that. I agree. I think we need probably to give services a bit more of a steer as to where our focus will be, you know, but not precluding the opportunity for them to bring other matters to us. So when would it be possible to find an hour in the diaries to have an informal meeting for us to talk about what we want out of the deep dive, so that we can give a bit more of a steer to the service, and to ensure that we're as well prepared to receive the presentations as the presenters are to give them to us, because it is a two-way process.
Absolutely, Chair. Quite happy to try and find a date as soon as possible, so we
Yeah.
can have that discussion. As it's informal, it makes it a lot easier. But
Yeah.
I think we need that chat really,
Yeah.
to give that guidance, so we can say, right, you know, if we can do it now in the next couple of weeks, that'll be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think we owe it to ourselves to do that. Councillor Graham and Councillor Chris are quite right, and I think we owe it to colleagues to give them a steer and to be prepared ourselves. Notwithstanding that, the service was given quite a lot of notice, so it is disappointing that they've been unable to present today. Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just back on the papers in section 9 there, the risk register and the SOPs report. I was just musing on the de-escalating risk one, I guess, Bets. It was, I accept the reduction in the risk from influenza-like illnesses, but I suppose the question left in my mind is if the risks that we've associated with that, you know, things causing staff absenteeism, increased workloads, etc., whether they shouldn't be retained unless we're satisfied that they aren't high-level risk. So I suppose I accept, sorry, maybe being clumsy here, I accept the risk in relation to influenza-like illnesses impacting on those is perhaps disappeared, but I didn't know if they still remain as an overall risk. And I did have another question as well, Chair, if I may. I feel like the double glazing salesman, you buy one, you can get one free.
Should I answer that one first,
if
Councillor?
you'd like to, Bets, yes, thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Be assured that things like it's that word again, absenteeism. And impact and demand and the thing is also covered as risks on most risk registers themselves, for lots of other reasons, not just related to influenza-like illnesses. That was just a strong one that was on there that was kind of a bit of a hang-on since COVID because of the massive impact of COVID, so that we felt it needed to be on there as a separate risk. But be assured that other services, they do have risks that relate to anything that would influence, is like impact on the demand on the services and staff absenteeism, and capacity to deliver the services that they need to deliver because of various reasons that relate to similar things. So yeah, be assured on that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Councillor Pete.
I didn't know, Chair, I was off on another point now. I didn't know if John wanted to add anything on that one.
John, is your point going to be different or the same? Same topic?
Going to be different.
Right, okay, Councillor Pete, you go with your question too, and then we'll go to John.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. On page 114, I think, which must be the SWOPs report, it's there's 75% of managers that didn't respond to the survey. And that was just feeling like that was telling me a bit of a story. And I wonder if we've got any plans to follow up that non-response rate.
Bets?
I'm actually going to defer this, if it's okay, to is Ian still with us from SWOT? Because that report and that survey was done by our internal SWOT colleagues. So I know in terms of myself, I have looked at the information that was provided back to SWOP, who very kindly shared it with me to enable, you know, to obviously to do some deep dive work ourselves on risk management, but I don't know whether there's an intention to follow up on that. So yeah, I'll hand you over to Ian.
Thanks, Bets.
Thank you, Bets. Obviously, as part of the audit work, we undertook a survey. It's much like life, I suppose. You know, when we all get surveys in life, often we get quite a small hit rate back. But what it did tell us was certain aspects that were included in the report. But also, I think what it does tell us is when we looked at the demographics around the people that didn't respond, we made a judgment somewhat that those that didn't respond reflected a lack of knowledge and a lack of engagement in the risk management process. So it did give us some information back. In terms of are we going to follow it up? There's no plans to follow it up, but certainly if the council wanted us to send another survey out, then I'd be more than happy to do that, you know, to show the improvement maybe as we go forward.
I think that picks up on my comments about the maturity model as well, and the other comments in the report about engagement and awareness. Because, you know, I agree with Councillor Pete, that does speak volumes. Jane, you wanted to come in, I'm assuming, to answer that question before we go back to John.
Yeah, we've recently started to do a series of sessions with senior managers across the organisation, and risk had some focus. I think it was week before last, maybe even longer than that, but recently we did a session on risk. And again, you know, we have various sessions at a senior leadership team, but EMT wanted to make sure that senior managers were understanding of the framework, understood their responsibilities in terms of that. So we did do that session, and I can't remember how many senior managers we had across the organisation, but there are a lot, and they all attended that session to reiterate some of those responsibilities. So I think that's, you know, raising awareness again of risk there. So I would hope if we were to do another survey, people would perhaps take more interest in that, but that's what we're doing at a corporate level to try and raise some of those things.
It is, yeah.
Bets, we can hear you. She's going.
Yeah.
John.
Thank you, Chair. My point was exactly the same as Councillor Pete's on page 114. As he said, 75% didn't respond, but of those that did respond, 90% hadn't even read the risk management framework.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an indictment.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I'm struggling to reconcile that with a reasonable assessment. It's a bit like the schools thing, assessing in one word, and when we've got a dire problem in this awareness section.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I'm just because I've got our purpose in front of us, reference internal audit. I mean, our second bullet point purpose is to ensure that the risk management strategy guides a programme of internal and external work to address controls and risks related to issues identified. And at the moment, you know, I summarised it with reference to the risk maturity page, but it's my sense is that Governance and Audit Committee are questioning the extent to which the whole organisation is sufficiently seized and aware of risk management at all levels and at all tiers of activity. And I think we need to pursue this one. I'm not quite sure which order to take this in. Is everyone wanting to come in the same point? Right, okay, I'm going to go to Councillor David first, then Bets, then Jane.
Just very briefly, Chair, but services are currently reviewing performance for the past 12 months, and I know for a fact that risk awareness is high on the agenda, so possibly that would suggest that they are aware of the findings within the audit report, and that they've put extra emphasis on risk awareness, just to assure committee.
Thank you,
Chair.
Very much appreciated. Bex.
Yes, I've got a couple of points, and one of them just tags on with Councillor David, just to say that yeah, services are, you know, they're going through their panel assessments at the moment, and risk is coming out quite strongly in that, and services are picking that up, which is great. So it's helping to raise awareness. But also you'll see in the action plan response to the SWOT analysis that I have quite a few actions that I'm planning on carrying out to help raise awareness of risk management. And then finally, just to mention that, you know, as I mentioned in the cover report, the 2019 risk management frameworks has been reviewed. So that is going to SLT next week and be coming to you guys on the 23rd of June. And then we will be having a massive push, promotion, raising awareness on the new risk management guidance and policy. So that's given me that's in a way an ideal opportunity, because it'll give us that opportunity to highlight the new, reviewed, updated, refresh, and do a massive push on that as well. So I'm tying all those three things together, which come quite nicely.
Thanks, Liz. I guess the question I had on the action plan responses is that an awful lot of the dates are 2024. And we're only in the very beginning of May 2023, and lots of the actions, like improve awareness of management of risk through communication campaign to all employees, the time scale is March 2024. So, you know, we're talking 9 months, well, yeah, 9-10 months hence. And create and deliver a tailored risk management training. The date for that is October 2024. So the dates do concern me in terms of achieving a change in awareness and engagement in risk management.
Do you want me to come back, or do I? Oh, I think Jane's going to speak.
Jane will come in.
Yeah, I think in terms of the dates, you know, it's being mindful that we're looking at 4 sessions during the year for one of them. So that takes a period of time. You know, we'll start immediately, but then we'll continue with that training as well. Bets goes to many of the service management teams and talks about risk there. I just wanted to give the committee a flavour of what happens in our own service. So from financial services perspective, risk and risk management and raising any new areas of risk or any issues is considered monthly at our management team. That then feeds through to the quarterly sessions with Councillor David and the Chief Exec, where they monitor how we're managing that risk and go through that as well. So the self-assessments that are coming through and the panels that we're having there is giving us some level of assurance then about what is happening at each individual service level. And as I said, coupled with speaking to senior managers directly to make sure they're aware of what they need to do, is all part of raising this awareness and getting people to fully consider the risks that they need to.
Yeah, that's really good to know, Jane. But I mean, I would be inclined to ask for the internal audit to be repeated, to endeavour to demonstrate improvements that are planned. But I don't really want to wait till sometime in 2024 to do that, because it feels like there's, you know, would be a real, you know, it feels like a long way off. So we could think about the dates. I'm going to bring in John and then Councillor Chris and then Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to make exactly the same point. I think it would be worthwhile for SWAP to actually repeat this survey sometime in the autumn.
Yeah. You know, 6 months from now would not feel unreasonable. You know, the beginning of November.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, if it was on the plan for the beginning of November, because it is such a fundamental part of our governance framework. Chris, Councillor Chris.
Yes, I mean, this has come up before around training and compliance with it. I mean, I think there was one of the reports that I raised questions about cyber training and stuff on there, and I think there is, depending on what role you've got within the organisation, people see it as either it's going to add value or not add value. But it's when something goes wrong is when the issue is, and about risk is in everything we do, and this is where it's critical. And I think really it's when staff are joining the organisation that we get them into some form of mandatory training so that it's covered off as quickly as possible before they can proceed into then the roles as a part of it. And we've got to try and pick that up, otherwise we're going to have an issue. and that puts the employee at risk, and it also puts the organisation at risk as well. So I think this is something that we cannot just leave it for that length of time. I was concerned with the length of time on it. I understand why they've done it, because that's the end of the financial year, and they're saying by the end of that period of time they will get that through. But to me, this needs to be taken a little bit more seriously.
Yeah, it feels to me that the committee is not currently assured of the arrangements in place. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add some of those comments, really, I think in terms of the risk management journey, and I've been looking at risk management for a number of years now in part of my role, we're certainly very much improved from where we were. And so certainly the direction of travel is in an upward direction. In terms of the outputs from the report and the survey, I think the survey tells us something, but surveys can sometimes be misleading. I think the subtleties of it are that our report indicates that from a senior management perspective, that was quite embedded, and managers were aware of that. Some of the survey, I think, indicated that as you drop down the layers, the knowledge became less. And so what I'm going to suggest is that we do another survey, and that survey perhaps looks at it from those layers level and identifies where people sit in the organisation and of their understanding, and to make sure that, you know, we can't expect every single person to have read the risk management strategy, because that's probably unrealistic. But it's important that certain layers are aware of that, and then they roll that and cascade that down to people below them, so that people understand about risk management but don't necessarily understand the details of the strategies. So maybe if we do another survey and we try and look at those layers and then give you some assurance around that. And just to add to that, I think risk management is at the cornerstone, well, one of the cornerstones of the authority, and there will most likely be a piece of work on it every year, I think, just to show that journey again and where we are in that journey. And
yeah, thank you. Thank you. I mean, I think what is in my mind is the extent to which the organisation is this the extent to which the organisation, the people surveyed, were willing to engage with internal audit and the survey and the conduct of a survey and data gathering by internal audit, and the extent to which the people surveyed were engaged with risk management. So for me, there are two potential things going on here. Is it that the organisation is not engaging and not understanding the importance of risk management, and or is the organisation not engaging and understanding the importance of internal audit? So that feels to me as there are potentially two quite important big corporate governance things going on here, and we don't know the answer yet, but I think this committee will want to understand the answer and be assured that that there is an adequate infrastructure for engagement and conduct of internal audit work, and the internal audit work is based on a robust approach to risk management, and that there are procedures and policies in place and training and awareness. Yep. Right, I've got Bets and Councillor Pete. Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll try not to repeat the points that have been made, because I basically agree with all of them that have been made. I just wanted to try and pick up on Ian's last comment about dropping down the layers. I do see that as very important, because for me, I firmly believe that risk management belongs to everyone, belongs to all members of the organisation. And one of the very important things for me is the risk identification. And I don't know off the back of that whether there's a need or a thought around perhaps separating out operational risk versus the other more strategic risks, because we really do need the people who are doing the jobs to be engaged with the risk management and to identify risks for us. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for Councillor Pete. That is that is helpful. And Bet wants to come in, and she may address the points you're making, Bet.
Actually, I want to address a point that Councillor Chris
okay, go for it.
Made regarding new managers. Just to say that we have, we do work with our colleagues in workforce organisation development, and risk management is part of the induction for new managers, but I believe it is just touched upon, as in things like performance management are just touched upon, and links are given to the risk management, because I do a video so people don't want to read the actual risk management framework. There is a 9-minute, 10-minute video on risk management that I do and refers to the framework. That is part of the induction module, but of course it's not mandatory. So that phrase of you can take a horse to water but you can't drink it springs to mind. But just to reassure Councillor Chris that we are trying our utmost, and it's really good to hear your feedback today, because I can take that back to WAD as well and say, look, could we make this a bit stronger in the induction module, that it isn't just passed to them as a link as some homework to do in the evening. And also it means, again, it means that it gives us a bit more strength when we're working with managers to say, look, please, could you cascade this down? Don't just keep it at that top tier level. I completely agree, risk is for everyone, which I think is literally the starting paragraph of the new risk management policy and guidance, to hopefully cascade that down to get all the managers, no matter what level they are, on board with it and embracing it, and just helping us to raise awareness. So it's, we need heads of service and the senior managers, etc., on board with it to promote risk management too.
Thanks, Bet. I mean, I would suggest that the training on this should be mandatory.
I very much like that, but
I mean, I was actually genuinely surprised that when I heard you saying this isn't mandatory training. So I think as a formal action from this meeting, I think I would like that to be taken away, and if it's not to be made mandatory, I think this committee would like to understand the reasoning for not making risk management training mandatory across the whole organisation at a strategic and an operational level. I think that's quite surprising, actually. Councillor Chris and then Jane.
Thanks, Bet. I mean, that was helpful to understand that. I mean, there are concerns. I mean, I've dealt with lots of different risk management training myself in my past career in the health service, and I also had to give people information about key policies, and it's not the most exciting of stuff. The only thing is when something goes wrong, what do people go to is policy. They go to strategies and look on there. And it's then when you get the accountability coming back in. So it's about reinforcing that this is for their own interest, because if you ignore it, you'll get caught out by the process. If we fall down, it's the process that will be looked at to see of how robust that is. And it is about having that assurance to it. And these managers are the leaders in the team, so they should be ensuring there's an accountability to them. Otherwise, that accountability can be transferred into their remit for not fulfilling their obligations on it. So it's for everyone's benefit. I do take on board if a service has got limited resources because of sickness or vacancies, that can cause some challenges, but then we've got to look at different ways and modes of how we can deliver that training in a meaningful way. And I know some of the departments have been looking at that recently, so hopefully those things on there. Finally, Chair, I think that we're trying to do this as being constructive, not destructive, and the message should be going across to all of the service areas is that we're trying to be helpful. Even when we go through processes around deep dives, it's not about finding fault is about finding solutions to make the service safer and better for the residents that we then are addressing and dealing with.
Absolutely, Councillor Chris. I completely agree with everything you've said, and this committee's role is to support the council to continuously improve and provide the best service it can. Jane, I'm proposing to bring you in after I've brought John and Councillor William in, and on the basis that there might be other, yeah? I'll bring John in again and then Councillor William.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This discussion is maybe distinctly uncomfortable with the reasonable assurance given in the front end of the report. I think I would suggest that we as a committee write to both the Cabinet and the SMT expressing our concerns in this area and seeking some really positive reaction from them, because it's quite central to our work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, John. I think that if we could have that as an action point to consider the terms that on which we could write to the Cabinet and SMT about internal audit and risk, John. So it's the
yes,
it's the yeah, it's the yeah. I want to make a point, but I'll come in after, but I've got a point that I want to make myself on risk. William, Councillor William.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. Well, I indicated simply to endorse completely your view about the importance of raising this up the agenda of training, because I think it's really essential, and particularly when I look across the training landscape and some of the things that we do receive training in, and all training is valuable, but this really appears to me to be of a higher order than some of the other areas, because it cuts across everything. I also support our Vice Chair's approach in terms of, or suggested approach in terms of writing to the leader, but also to the EMT on this matter to flag this up. Councillor Chris has gone through quite poignantly some of the consequences of us not embracing this with seriousness, and it seems to me that the whole issue of the assurance levels, but the issue of risk culture and risk appetite, which is a term that I haven't heard so much about today, is something that we really need to be cognizant of and to look at seriously. I mean, we have at the very highest level of our organisation, of our authority, interim arrangements in place, and it's really important that we don't have anything that weakens our focus on this area, because it doesn't seem to be where it should be, and I think there is potential danger out there if we don't act and act in a more timely way than something that goes into the second half of the next calendar year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor William. Jane, I'm just going to come in myself, because the point I wanted to make is exactly in the space that Councillor William was moving into. The strategic risk that I'm not seeing in the risk register, unless I've missed it, and I have tried to read it quite carefully. What I'm not seeing is the risk connected with the absence of the Chief Executive for 2 months and interim part-time arrangements, and some of the executive, some of the tier below the Chief Executive also being interim appointments. And I would see those interim arrangements and the prolonged absence of a Chief Executive to be a potential leadership risk to the organisation in terms of leadership capacity, the risk of further turnover and changes, and that always leads to a bit of turmoil, and the cascade effect of that through the organisation. And I would sincerely hope that someone in the organisation was actually managing that risk of absence, interim and turnover at the most senior levels, the most senior level and the level below chief as well, because that, and I'm not making any criticism of any individuals whatsoever, it's just on the basis of experience, complex organisations that don't have firm leadership at the top, it can perpetuate and cascade through the organisation, and it is a real fundamental issue of leadership and corporate governance. And that's the risk that I'm not seeing on the strategic risk register. So, but thanks, Councillor William, because you gave me a perfect introduction to that comment that I was kind of holding back on. So, Jane.
If I pick up just on your last point, you know, I think at a cabinet level and an EMT level, we recognise that risk, hence the interim arrangements being put in place. Discussions are ongoing there about the other interim arrangements across the organisation. So I just want to give you some assurance that all of those things are being considered. And I know the interim chief executive has already spoken to each of our regulators to get their views and perceptions around that as well. So there is a lot of discussion going on that, but recognise your need to have that level of assurance, so I can take that back. The one thing I think I would say in terms of risk management, we've had a lengthy discussion here today, but I would remind everybody just to go back to that audit report, noting what John said about reliance on the level of assurance. You know, there is a lot of things in here that justify that reasonable level of assurance. I think we've picked up on a couple of the negatives. We've picked up on a survey. We don't know what the result of that survey would be had everybody actually complied, but taking on board absolutely your comments there, Lynn, in terms of, is it a reluctance in completing a survey from internal audit, which in itself is a problem, or is it more around risk? I think we've not got a number of answers here to give you the level of assurance you're looking for, but I don't perceive this as being perhaps as big an issue as it's become as part of this meeting. So I think a lot of the things that we've already got in place are addressing some of the shortcomings identified through the audit. So I just want to give everybody that level of assurance, please, to look at what are the good points here, but also then we've been through a number of actions that we're already taking to address what we do see as some of those issues. The survey, if we rerun it at a later date, should give you a better understanding of that. I will take back to EMT a consideration about mandatory training for risk. You know, we have to be careful about how much mandatory training is there across the organisation and which are those most important to be mandatory. That doesn't take away from the importance of risk, but absolutely there may be other mechanisms in which we can make sure that we drive that through. So I just wanted to sum up from my perspective there, as I don't see, I think we've done an awful lot of work on risk, and I think we are now reaping the benefits of that. But as we said, there are some shortcomings that we still need to address.
Thank you very much, Jane, for that summing up and that response. And I propose that we close this agenda item on Jane's remarks, and thank Bex for her paper and for the work that she does in the background, because I've seen an improvement and I've only been here for a year. But clearly there's a way to go, and these systems are always the subject of continuous improvement. But thank you, Bets, for everything that you do in this space. It is very, very much appreciated, and the clarity of your reports. So thank you. I'll move us on now to our agenda item 10, which is our self-assessment action plan. Those of you who were able to attend our face-to-face meeting in County Hall at the beginning of March, I think now, it was some time ago, excellently facilitated meeting where we went through our self-assessment from last year and that action plan, and used that to inform the current product before you, which is our updated self-assessment action plan for 2023. So I was really just going to ask Wynne if you had anything to add to what I've just said, and then open the floor to questions, comments, or areas that we might have overlooked.
Nothing much to add, Chair. I know I've had a few comments back from John about whether some of the issues in the 22-23 action plan are actually completed or not, and I think that's a discussion we still need to complete really with that. There are some actions obviously still in there in progress in the 22-23 report, which probably we need to bring forward to 23-24, and then we can just close off 22-23 would make sense. And other than that, then you've got what I identified initially, unless anybody's got anything different to add to the 10 that are currently there for the 23-24 year.
Thanks, Wynne. Any comments or questions, colleagues? No. So I'm going to take silence as broad agreement to our self-assessment and the action plan, and ask if John and Wynne can have a dialogue outside of the meeting just to put to bed the outstanding issues that John has raised, if that's okay, John?
Yes, that's fine.
Right, thanks very much. So, and same as last year, when we'll bring regular updates on progress against fulfilling the commitments in the action plan.
Yes, Chair, I got them in. I think it's work programmed on a quarterly basis.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that. Agenda item 11 is the summary reports of our working group activity. And just to note that we now have a date in the diary for the first meeting of the fourth working group, the internal audit working group, which I think, given the conversation that we've just had, will be quite an important working group. On the first meeting of that will be on the 24th of May. So I'm really pleased that we've got that in the diary. So you've got, I think, in the supplementary pack, the capital one and the others in the main pack. So I was really just going to take these reports as read and ask for any comments or questions on the reports. The HOPES and HTR are in the main pack, and the capital one is in the supplementary pack. I can see a hand from John.
I'll defer if there are any questions before I come in.
Any questions or comments? I mean, just before I bring you in, John, I was just really for Wynne and the wider team that support the committee. I think these are really, really helpful summary reports. So, you know, really grateful for the time spent providing them with to us. It's a really helpful reports, and it's a really good record of our work. So really grateful to Wynne and the team for producing them.
Yes, I concur with that. I put on record my appreciation of the way the notes are written. It's just one thing. The HALPS working group has reached a sort of midway stage, and I was trying to get together an informal meeting to get the views of councillors who were around at the time of the inception of HALPS. Unfortunately, no councillors were able to attend that day, and I've not yet been able to get into a new date for that. Can I just ask the councillors concerned if they could please respond to the emails looking at the potential revised dates for such a meeting, because it's absolutely imperative that we get your views. Councillor William, I know you've actually responded, and I rather guess that some of your comments under apologies were probably the reason for another absence. But if we could get together soon, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, John, for raising that. And again, referring back to earlier discussions in this meeting, Houps is still very much a live issue, and we need to attend to that. Our next agenda item is our forward work plan.
I think
Oh, sorry, is it? Sorry, John.
Councillor Ange, I think, wanted to say
Oh,
something.
sorry, Ange, sorry.
No, that's fine. It was just I take it, am I one of the councillors that you want a response from?
If you would please, Ange, yes.
Okay, it's just that we weren't there. We were there when it started, but we weren't there when it was put together. Does that make a difference? Because it was put together in the previous one before us, and then they started it when we started.
Sorry, you've lost me. We've had.
Well,
we've had two meetings of the working group.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
And I wanted to just draw together any conclusions that councillors may have had as a result of those two meetings.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, sorry, I got that completely wrong in my head. I thought you were wanting to know about how Houps was put together.
Oh, no,
no, that's no, it's right. That's where my confusion came into it. Sorry,
okay.
that's.
Cheers.
Right, thanks, Ange. Thanks, John. Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give my apologies for not being able to attend the original suggested date, which I hadn't probably registered, and I think that was obviously common to other colleagues. I'm pleased to have the reassurance from John that I have responded. Now, I think it's also important to again to reiterate the thanks to Wynne for overseeing the process, but also to Rachel for doing a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of trying to herd the cats of the, whether we joined in 2012, 2017 or 2022. There is an issue there to pull together, and the meetings do tend to kind of escalate, and it's important that we manage to diarise them correctly. So I'm sure your comment about Councillor Gareth is correct, and as soon as he's sufficiently back up to speed, he'll certainly want to re-engage as he has done. But Rachel's been superb in ensuring the documentation and also the doodle poll and other things to to pull this process together. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor William, and thank you, John. So we'll move on to agenda item 12, our forward work programme. I'm just looking when at the 23rd of June.
Yes, Chair.
And we've said we'll have the 23-24 audit plan on there. I think it would be
4 items, Chair, to add to that.
Yeah.
Now I've added this morning. So there's the audit plan, there's the annual report from Ian, and the 2 swap reports on the housing issues. So those 4 will go into there.
Yeah, right, fab. And I think picking up Councillor Graham's report, Councillor Graham's response comments from earlier, and Councillor Gareth's comments from March, it would be really good if we could have this informal hour on what we really want out of the deep dives in good time, so that we can advise the next deep dive session on the 23rd of our expectations of them. Yeah.
I've just been looking at diary, Chair. I've got a potential date I can talk to members about if they come into the private session or at the very end on reflection.
Righty-ho, fab. Thanks very much.
Just see whether that's workable or not.
Mm-hmm. And when you were saying the items we were adding, did you have the Audit Wales planning item that Bethan mentioned earlier?
I can't remember, Chair. Hold on. Let me just, I've got it open.
Because I think Bethan said it was currently with EMT, the Audit Wales land use planning assessment.
The planning report. Yes, the planning report. I know it's been received by the authority. I'm not quite sure where we are in terms of responding to it.
Right. Okay.
I think that's the issue. It's got to go through our processes and then respond back to Audit Wales, and then I think, because normally we have the action plan from the service to go with, the Audit Wales plan to come to governance and audit is the way we normally do things.
I think that's been completed. We're just waiting for a date for it to
You
be
have?
agended.
Ah, right.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, just
Well,
let
that's
us
fair
know.
enough. Then I'll
Just
put
let
it
us know when
on.
it's ready.
I'll put it on for the 23rd then, and then I can work to it. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Councillor William, I can see you might have a clash on the 23rd of June.
This matter would take priority over the other reference I've made to the governors conference. I just wanted to confirmation of timings, particularly with a pre-meet to accommodate as well. I certainly would be looking to attend this, but possibly other than the other is just for information, really.
I think we need a pre-meeting sometime in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Not so much a pre-meeting for the committee meeting, but a bit of a discussion of what we want out of the deep dives and the kind of guidance we want to give to officers who are coming to give us a deep dive, not specifically on any topic, but more of a general discussion on how do we establish what we want out of deep dives and how do we convey that to officers so that we are prepared and they're giving us what we need. I think something like that needs to happen soon, and it may be going forward that we do need a short pre-meeting as a committee in addition to our formal meeting. On the basis of what you just said, when that we'll be doing on the 23rd, my hunch is we're not going to do it in between 10 and 12:30. My hunch is that that would be quite tight on timing. So can we think about that? Because, you know, we're already on 12 o'clock today and we're not having a deep dive.
I will extend the time, Chair.
Yeah. So these agendas do seem to be very, very, they're growing. Jane, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, only briefly. It was going back to children's services and the discussion that we had earlier. I know I had a bit of an email exchange with the director just to understand why they've not been able to come today. I think there's been a bit of a misunderstanding of what was expected of them, and when they realised what that expectation was, they were unable to meet it perhaps in the deadline. So she is very apologetic and said she of course will ensure that they're able to come to the next meeting. But she's also given me a bit of an update from a recent CIW visit. And she is saying that CIW themselves are very pleased with the progress that they're seeing in our children's services. So I thought it was important for committee to hear that. So I hope that gives you a bit of assurance.
No, that's really helpful. And when we need to look at the 23rd of June, and are we having that, you know, we're knocking forward all of the deep dives, but you and I can work out which one we're exactly going to have on the 23rd.
Yes, Chair, because, you know, we've got the children's risks services budget on there as well.
Yeah.
Experience from last time was 2 in a day.
No, it was too much. No, it was too much. I think we were all, you know, in due respect to the officers, if they're going to put work into preparing for this, the committee needs to be in a space where it can engage. And I think we were all utterly exhausted by the end of the last meeting. I think everyone was. Okay, any more comments on the work programme going forward? No, right, thanks Wynne for that, and it's shaping up nicely, so thank you very much. We're not having a deep dive, as already commented, which brings us to close to the close of the public meeting. Moving to agenda item 14, which asks the committee to consider passing a resolution to exclude the public from the next part of the meeting. So the resolution, when do I need to read this out, or is it sufficient that it's in front of everyone on the agenda?
It's fine that it's on the agenda, Chair. The resolution is just the first paragraph that the committee needs to approve.
So is the committee content to approve the resolution?
Yeah, I'm proposing that, Chair.
proposing it. Thank you, Councillor William.
Second.
Seconder, Councillor Pete. Thank you very much. Okay, when can we please end the public meeting on the basis that we have an exempt item to consider?
Yes, Chair, bear with me for a second, please, and I'll.
Thank you very much.
There's actually no members of the public in at the moment, but if
Mhm.
I end it for the attendees.